Welcome back to Betoota Talks. We're live from Canberra. I'm accidentally wearing a teal shirt, but you will know that it is the Betoota Race Club official merchandise. So shout out to
teal
everyone.
On the outside and red in the middle, like a lot of them.
Yep. Thank you for having us in your office to do this. Maybe our first ever Betoota Talks podcast inside someone's office. Josh Burns MP. Now, McNamara, that's where you're from. That's what you represent. Labor MP, of course, we should specify for those on the tractor who don't get down to Melbourne too often. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and tell us about those demographics, and are they changing?
I grew up in Caulfield, which is sort of in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. Some people would know it because of the Monash University right next to the Caulfield Racecourse. But then if you go sort of more into towards St Kilda, it's sort of such a classic suburban Australia. And my parents bought a house for bought a block of land for just over 150 grand. And it was this classic, what was outer suburbs almost at that time. And now it's become a lot more dense, a lot more gentrified, a lot more apartments are being built. It's hardly any sort of 4 or 5 bedroom homes. Everyone's sort of living as part of closer inner city Melbourne. So it is changing a lot. Now I live in St Kilda. I love St Kilda. It's sort of the right in the middle of the electorate, and it's such a if you want to come to Melbourne and have good food, have a drink,
SB Hotel,
the SB. I did my campaign launch at the SB last term. Yeah,
good wild pub.
The floors are so. The famous thing with the SB, right, is that anyone who's walked through the SB in the Gershwin room where they do the big live music knows that the floors were notoriously sticky, right? Like you'd have to really use your quads to lift your shoes off the floor, right? Whereas now the Renault still has the sort of same vibe of the SB, but the floors are less sticky.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose it's the only place you go for a paddle down there in Melbourne, isn't it?
Yeah, you can go on the lake. So people sail on the lake. On the Albert Park Lake, where you just with the Grand Prix.
You can go for a swim in that lake at the Grand Prix.
No. Paddle. You said paddle.
Sorry.
Maybe it's like potato scallop and potato cake.
It's a Queensland word, you know.
Yeah.
So go and get yourself wet.
So in Albert Park, you can go sailing and you can go.
I suppose you could go for a swim.
I wouldn't recommend. You can't. It's only about you only go up to your waist most of the Albert Park.
Right.
But you can go for a swim. You can go for a swim in St Kilda at the beach or Middle Park Beach, Port Melbourne. They're also the other parts of the electorate, and South Bank, which is sort of the home of apartments, the arts, all the big creative institutions.
South Banks.
Or the world of entertainment.
Crown Casino. We were staying there one
night.
I don't
like it down there.
He booked the hotel when we were drunk, and he accidentally put us in the deluxe of the Crown. That was pretty.
That was the first time
on the Betoota.
That was the first time in my life I'd ever swum off a ground level.
Yeah.
You know, at that. This isn't an ad for Crown, but they've got a pool up in the sky. Fantastic.
They do. It's a pretty good pool, actually. Yeah, I've been up there
at the Metropole.
Now, you get a robe as well if you're up there.
A robe, yeah. I think you might have been given that.
You would have done a bit of robe work up there.
There was a bit of
circle work in the robes.
Well, actually, there was a bit of a mix up with our rooms, and to make it up, they sent up a bottle of Pet Nat, and this bloke came up. He goes,
yeah. Here's
your champagne, and I was like, it's fucking Pet Nat. You're from Melbourne. You should know the difference. And he just goes, oh, sorry, sir. I was like, no, I'm joking. It's like, all right. I said,
you got through that.
Yeah.
Fitzroy. But I want to talk, before we continue talking about this lovely night we had out in Melbourne 2 years ago.
In McNamara.
In Macnamara.
All right,
you're talking about community. You're talking about your parents, buying a place there for 150 grand after working at the cinemas for a week in 1982.
Yeah.
What do you see happening to communities in Australia in terms of a sense of place? Because that's a big thing with the housing crisis.
Yeah.
The answer that will often be given, young people will often be given when they talk about, hey, look, I've shifted my expectations. I don't expect a quarter-acre block anymore. I'd be happy with a bed somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, go decentralise and go to fucking Tamworth where there's no nowhere to work.
Go
Yeah.
to Mildura.
Yeah, go to the
Yeah.
bush. But people are forgetting when they say that to young people that eventually young people need to be near their parents. Their parents get
Totally.
older. They have kids. They need their parents to be around there. And you kind of need some sense of place and some sense of like connection. What are you seeing in your
So this is
hometown?
a massive issue locally, right? So people also, one thing I wanted to paint a picture around McNamara is that like there are different spots around sort of this middle corridor where you've got about 70% of people living in apartments, with over half the people in my electorate are renters, right? So there is this sort of transient, natural nature of the fact that because you're in the city, there's a lot of apartments, a lot of young people, that people do move in and out, and they try and sort of often move not too far away and get rentals. But like, what's the big social driver behind that? Like, if you're going to move and go from a rental in Caulfield to St Kilda, like I did, what's keeping you in the sort of in the area? And there's a couple of answers, right? There are some big communities in my electorate. Obviously, I've got the Jewish community. So for a lot of them, it's about being near community infrastructure, being near synagogues and schools and that kind of stuff. The other big community I've got is the LGBTIQ community. And so people often make the mistake that McNamara is just a Jewish electorate. It's also an LGBTIQ electorate, which I'm really proud of. And
LJBTQI. I think that was the joke we made in the car. LJ, put a J in there too.
Well, everyone's in the mix, eh? And so, like, we've got a lot of community infrastructure as well for the LGBTIQ community. The Pride Centre's in St Kilda, and it's sort of and then obviously for people who work in the arts, South Bank is home to so many different organisations. A lot of the people who work in post production or audio, there's a lot of sound companies in South Melbourne, Port Melbourne. There's a lot of digital companies who are doing creative works as well. So like that whole area, the whole sort of thing is like, what is it about you that you want to feel connected to, and do you want to live there? And then the next challenge is obviously, well, can I afford to stay there? And that's one of the big challenges that we've got locally, is how do you have enough housing? And there is this tension of, well, we need to build more homes near around where our communities are, but then you also do get a little pushback from existing community as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one, particularly with the Jewish community where they like to stay close to each other. And we've seen it time after time. Queensland sees it a lot too. Like during the pandemic, all of the godless Gentiles who didn't need to be near any particular community moved to the Gold Coast. You know what I mean? Yeah. Jewish people don't do that.
Oh, if they're like, I think our community has a few apartments in the Gold Coast as well. Yeah. But I think people like holidaying up there. But
thought it was more Noosa.
No.
Oh no, sorry.
Port Douglas, right? Isn't that Australia's Florida?
No, that's more Kooyong, isn't it?
I think Kooyong has Noosa, McNamara has
Kooyong or
Ballarat, and the other one on Cattle Avenue. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked here, but no, I like. It is a big thing, and community is important to people, right? And like, even for the Jewish community, it's it's obviously things that are like, as I said, synagogues or schools or community organizations that really connect you with the community. But like, if you were to speak to someone, just anyone you knock on the door of someone in St Kilda, you ask them like, why do you like living in St Kilda? And often the answer comes back is like, I just love walking down Ackland Street. I know this person who works at that shop. I know this person who works at that shop. I like going over here. It's just the things in your local community that you feel connected to. And people don't even realize how much that actually is a driver in like, why do you want to live somewhere? Why do you want to be around them? And I think that's also, it gives people a sense of comfort and community. It's really important.
You forget that too, right? Like, Melbourne is big like that, where people have their patch because they have such a big inner city, and they have so many cities and suburbs in the inner city. And I can just, as a Queenslander, can name off my head 3 or 4 people that are St Kilda people, completely unrelated. Yeah. Paul Kelly, Shane Warne. We all know the people that's their spot.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're rich or poor. It's just because that's where they're at.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one for you, local member.
It's like threading a needle every single day, but it's a beautiful thing. And like having difference, like growing up and representing McNamara, I'm sort of all roads and sort of complex politics lead through Macnamara. You know, we're really progressive. We have a really strong climate movement. We have a large LGBTIQ community. We also have, you know, we have a lot of religious people, a lot of people who are agnostic, a lot of people who are atheists, a lot of people who don't affiliate with religion at all, a large Jewish community. We've got a growing Hare Krishna community. We have a large Chinese community, large Indian community. It's all beautiful and it's all part of it. And I love representing all of them.
I want to talk now about, speaking of threading a needle, obviously a very tricky couple of years for anyone who is a Jewish person in Parliament, I guess, or seen to be Jewish. Sometimes they completely confuse who is and who isn't Jewish. You are Jewish, Josh.
The proof is not for this podcast.
Yeah. Well, we do have a camera. Anyway,
well, it's either that or you're
no, because I'd have to recite blessings and I'd have to do all that kind of stuff, and I'd have to get my.
We could actually start one of those channels. We'd make a bit of cash.
Either that or you're a good Protestant border from Warrnambool, you know. Good farm boy.
I can only do this on the Betoota. I'm going to get in trouble for this. It's going to end up in something.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, well,
it's all right.
We'll move on.
Now, how does it feel to be a Jewish man, proud Jewish man in the Labor Party?
Yeah.
When obviously the Liberal Party have become the inglorious bastards who vow to defend your people, and they're the only ones who can do it.
Yeah, like
so they say.
So they say. I mean, look, I think the first thing to say is it genuinely has been a difficult couple of years. And even the work I did recently around trying to tackle anti-Semitism at universities, like that work predates October 7 and the war. And like Jewish kids are going to universities right now. They're not showing the fact that they're Jewish. They're putting away any sort of ability to identify publicly as being Jewish. People are not wearing the yarmulkes or the skull caps. And, you know, for a lot of people, it's something that actually is a really, you know, really challenging thing to sort of go past that precipice of saying, like, you know, do I want to be publicly visibly Jewish? And that's something that really hurt me inside, that in Australia, like, you know, you want people, like, be who you are and be proud of it and identify with who you are and be true to yourself. And especially a lot of the community, they're sort of second and third generation of people who came to this country looking for a safe haven, fleeing Europe. And so for me, being the MP through all of that, I felt a real weight and a real sense of responsibility. I actually haven't really been interested in fighting with the Liberal Party about this. It's just it's so much more personal than that. Yeah. That like, I know the Liberal Party have sort of, like, Peter Dutton's had a crack at me, whatever. Like, I actually think it's really important that we kind of work together on this stuff.
Well, we gave you an alley-oop there and you kind of were very graceful about it.
Well, it seems from our perspective in the Queensland Channel Country that there's it's been people in this building and in the media are finding it hard to see the difference between, you know, a Jewish person and the state of Israel. Do you think there's a bit of a disconnect that's kind of made things a bit?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So I think that there's a couple of things to say. Obviously, like, I mean, I've got family over there. I've got friends over there. You know, it's like the Palestinian community here would obviously have deep family ties to the Palestinian people over there. You know, if you're a German expat living in Australia, you'd have deep connections to Germany, right? There's there's often person-to-person links where people feel deeply connected to the two communities. Now, that doesn't mean that they are supporters of one particular political organization or another. It doesn't mean they're supportive or not supportive of the government of Israel. It just means that from a person-to-person point of view, the Jewish community does feel deeply connected to Israel. In saying that, though, like, what we've seen in Australia is people target the Jewish community on the basis that, like, because of how they feel about something that's gone on in the Middle East. And I think that's really dangerous. You know, it's actually completely unacceptable because, you know, people in Australia are not responsible for whatever you think is happening over there. And I think to target one community, whether it's a Jewish community or, you know, we have seen attacks on Islamic people and on mosques, and like, that's not acceptable either. So
it kind of others you a little bit because, like, I look at the proud Catholics, right, in Australia. Barnaby Joyce, proud Irish Catholic. Is the equivalency to come after him and you know, firebomb his electoral office in 1989 because the IRA have blown up the Brighton Hotel? Is that the equivalent?
Well, I was only 2 at that stage, so I didn't do that. But
He was working as a bouncer in Dirranbandi. But,
no, I think that's a great way of sort of articulating the point. Like, people in Australia just want to live in Australia. We love this country, it's been Australia. I can't tell you how important Australia has been to the Jewish community and the Jewish people in Australia. Like, people fucking love this country, and it's changed families' sense of self, sense of purpose, to feel a sense of belonging to a country after leaving a place that basically kicked us out and persecuted our families. Australia has been the opposite, right? And the Jewish communities felt like they can participate, they can get involved in all different aspects of Australian life. And, I'm a member of the federal parliament, and there's a few of us. Like, Australia's so important and so wonderful to our community. I think that's almost been the heartbreaking aspect of well, we just want to live here. We want our friends and family to have peace, and we want to be able to move on.
They does Australia, as a whole, have a pretty good track record in the treatment of Jewish people? I kind of just look at the history in terms of Monash and was it Isaac Isaacs, the governor
General.
Governor General?
Yeah.
This was happening well before any other country would have a head of state that was Jewish.
I mean,
but do we have a good history?
Yeah, well, not bad. Like there's obviously bits of checkered history, like the Royal Melbourne Golf Club didn't allow Jews in for a while, and that also created Cranbourne Golf Club. So the Jewish community created their own golf club, and now that Jews are allowed into all the golf clubs, Cranbourne sort of has been sort of sold off. So, there is a history of being slightly excluded from different sort of more establishment parts of society. But on the whole, it's been like a land of opportunity. And, we've had 22 Jewish members of parliament. Labor Party's had more than all the other parties combined, by the way. And we've had, treasurers, attorney generals, we've had, high court judges, we've had all sorts of extremely prominent positions.
North Melbourne Kangaroo.
We've got a North Melbourne Kangaroo.
Yeah.
Harry Sheasel.
Yeah.
Oh man, that guy is an absolute jet. I've met Harry a couple of times. He's such a good guy and so level-headed and down to earth. And as someone who, that's also never really been our strong point is footy. I was one of the worst footballers in the VAFA, which has a long list of pretty terrible footballers. I see some really average footballers playing in the VAFA, but I was down the bottom.
Well, then, you've got bloody Richard Pratt. He turned up here on a boat and then ended up in Raheen in Toorak.
He did, yeah.
And then you've got the godfather of Australian football, Frank Lowy.
Yeah.
Let's not forget Jimmy Barnes, by the way.
Is Jimmy?
Yep.
Is he?
Yep.
Is he?
He's one of the tribe.
Is he?
Yep.
Oh, I might have to send him a text. Invite him to the next kosher barbecue.
No, but just lastly on this, I mean, how does it feel? You mentioned the Royal Melbourne Golf Club before, that kind of waspy elitism that kept Jewish people out of certain spaces. How does it, did you feel like there's been a 180 on that now where, people are trying to pitch the Jewish community as, what the Royal Melbourne Golf Club used to be, as there's, you've kind of been put on the whole, rich white men thing.
Yeah. I mean, it is a dangerous trope, right?
Yeah.
It's a dangerous stereotype to say that, you hear it often that we're affiliated with money and power and all this sort of stuff. And that's something that it's a classic stereotype against the Jewish community, which I would say people need to be really careful with because, like any community, you have people who are able to have influence and you get people who are, living in public housing and, of course you do, right? Every community is like that. And so I do think that, certainly anti-Semitism is coming from all different places, right? And in the sort of neo-Nazi side of things, that's a common one of they've got all the money, they've got all the power, all this sort of stereotypes, almost what you saw in Europe in the 1930s.
Now, I want to apologize before I made a snarky comment. It was mostly aimed at the Burmers, not necessarily your parents, but I did make a crack about, working at the cinema for a week and being able to buy a home. I imagine your parents worked hard for everything they
They
have.
did.
As did a lot of people from that generation. What is the story with your family? Where were you politicized? What was the influences that inspired you as a young, as Bob Catter would say, he's not a bad looking bloke, to decide to put your hand up and be a federal member of parliament when you're still young and beautiful?
Yeah. Wow. That was not the question I thought was coming today. No, it's look. So the big influences on my life were my grandparents, right? All four of them came from different countries. My grandfather was born in Carlton. He was the only one born in Australia. And then my grandmother on my mum's side was born in Germany, and she left in late 1938. She fled persecution, and she sort of, I grew up, I spent a lot of time in their house. My mum was working full time. My dad worked full time, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as a kid. And so we would talk to them, and she spoke to me about, what it was like coming to Australia, what she remembers of being a 4-year-old and having to flee and be a refugee and coming to Australia, and then what it meant to be Australian, and how she still held on to sort of her German identity and German culture. So I sort of had that influence, which was, these lessons around not discriminating against people, respecting one another, not picking on minorities, the dangers of intolerance, the dangers of ignorance. That was sort of drilled into me. And then on the other side, my grandparents on my dad's side were both, one was born in London and the other one was born in Edinburgh in Scotland. And they're both big, poor families, and they both left school at 13 or 14 to look after their brothers and sisters. And, and then they came to Australia, and, all my family were able to. My parents,
on the 10-pound poms? Were they on the
10-pound poms, yeah.
Right.
And they came here. They came with nothing. They worked their ass off, and they, my grandfather was a baker. He did his back by the time he was 60. But he put a roof over my dad's family, and my dad and my mum's generation were able to go to university for free. And I sort of, in my mind, growing up, I sort of pieced together the fact that, well, on one side, this country gave my family a safe place, an opportunity, and freedoms and equality before the law. And then on the other side, it was all of the social mobility and all of the ability to educate, have access to healthcare, have access to, clean drinking water, and all of the things that you need in order to a safe home. It was the economics of being a migrant family and able to turn that around in a generation. And so I sort of grew up with all of that. I became sort of interested in politics, and I never thought I was going to have a career in politics. It was sort of, I didn't come from a political dynasty. I'm not a downer. Or a Catter, or a Beasley, or one of the.
Or a Little Proud.
Is it Little Proud? Is he?
His dad was a Joe minister.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yonks ago.
Yeah, right. At KPMG, or wherever David worked before. He's all right, David.
Yeah, he is.
Nice guy. So for me, it was like growing up, seeing what this country did for my family. And then I got engaged. And for me, the obvious choice was the Labor Party. So I started volunteering for the Labor Party. I ran in a safe Liberal seat in 2014 as a 27-year-old, just to sort of see how I'd go. And we did pretty well.
Dutton did that as a 19-year-old and still lost. So
yeah,
a safe Liberal seat.
Did he? No, I was a Labor guy in a safe Liberal seat. But we did really well. And then I met Daniel Andrews, who was the Premier for Victoria for 100 years, and he's an amazing guy.
We know Cos. We know a few of the. We haven't actually interviewed Dan Andrews, but so that's what you're saying. He was kind of a formative influence.
Yeah. He was massive, and I worked for him. Did my apprenticeship under him, and then the opportunity came to run for Macnamara, and I put my hand up, and I've been lucky enough to be elected twice.
It sounds like you had to renounce a few citizenships before you got in here.
I did.
You had to do a bit of life admin.
Oh man,
the British one wasn't worth much by the time you had
No.
Brexit had happened. So you don't want to keep the European one.
The British Home Office were pretty clunky to deal with, but no, it did cost me hundreds of pounds to relinquish my British citizenship.
I've handed mine back.
Have you?
Worthless.
Hong Kong. He was born in Hong Kong.
Wait.
Yeah. We were all given one at handover.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, British was the only one I had.
All right. So tell me a little bit about what you view to be like your personal priority politically right now. So if you had a magic wand, you had complete mandate, you were prime minister, what would you be doing first?
The army was in control of everything and they answered to you. What would you do?
Like the biggest challenge that we have in Australia is housing.
Okay. So we fuck off the private golf clubs, medium density housing on all of them. Public golf courses remain there.
We get army engineers to go into Toorak and start subdividing and putting houses on these
McMansions
giant
become
estates.
boarding houses.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the value of land means that particular proposition.
They're just numbers on a page, man.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the army answers to me, right? I mean, housing's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing that you want is to be able to give people at least a pathway into the housing market. And the difficult thing with density in the city as well is like the economics of actually building homes is so messed up at the moment. So it's becoming like if you want to buy a 2-bedroom apartment in my electorate, like it used to cost sort of between $300 and $400 to build it on each floor. Now you're looking at $700,000 just in costs, and then we're not talking about a massive apartment. So the prohibitive cost of actually building up is massive. And then like how do you deal with growth in the suburbs as well? It's a complicated process and a complicated problem. I think the answer lies in a lot of what we're doing at the moment, but continuing to grow that at a bigger scale. We also, we can't just subsidize our way out of it. We actually need to structurally change the way in which we're designing cities, designing our country. We're no longer a country of 12 million people. We now have 25, 27 million people. We need to create new pockets and new cities as well.
We also need to start building some better homes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever spent a night in one of those new builds out near the airport in Melbourne, but I had an Airbnb experience there a couple of years ago. Melbourne, for those on the tractor in the Darling Downs, it's either fucking hot or it's fucking cold.
Sometimes both in the day.
Or it's windy.
Sometimes at the same time.
Yeah. But look, that house was both hot and cold. I'd never seen anything like it. It was exactly the same as it was outside as it was inside.
Yeah.
So
couldn't swing a cat between the houses and
and you people are bunging on about, there's not enough energy to go around, things are going out, so we've got to build new power plants, put solar panels on the roof, put Tesla batteries on everyone's walls. If we just built better homes, do you think we'd use less power?
Yeah, and energy efficiency is a massive problem. We're all the leaky homes.
Like in Melbourne or in Victoria now,
they're pretty well sealed.
No. You can't get a bloody gas stove anymore. Oh, yeah. They've banned them. But they're telling us we've got to use gas to make power, but you can't have one.
A Thai restaurant's allowed to use gas stoves. They got it for the wok, right?
You need it for the wok. You need it for the wok.
No more wok dishes.
No more wok bolognese.
Well, I've never seen it I think you can do an
exemption. There's always something going on down there.
Like what's the
hand a copper grand and you can have a stove.
The word's lost. I've lost the word. What's the induction? I'm sure
induction,
you can do an induction wok.
Yeah.
I've seen some powerful induction.
That Neil Perry, that chef with the ponytail, he only uses induction now.
Well. Yeah, I mean,
he does all the Qantas food, like all the stuff that you're eating up there in business class. It's made by Neil.
Yeah. well, exactly, right?
Yeah. What was the question again?
What did you do?
Energy efficiency in
homes.
What
do you do in the house? What describe? I feel like this is unresolved trauma. Unresolved trauma of you in this house.
No.
It wasn't like
that. The fridge was full of piss.
Were you by yourself?
No. We couldn't leave because it was too windy.
Who are you with?
No, I was with some other blokes from The Advocate. I was with the sportsman Imran Gashgori.
Yeah.
He was there, but he's off the piss. But
so hang on, were you the only one uncomfortable, or was everyone uncomfortable?
Well, he's from a hot country, so he's fine. We're like
except when the house went cold.
Yeah, and then all of us are cold because no one likes being cold.
No.
But there are some people who can tolerate being hot.
How are these places getting built? Everyone drives past it, except for the poor buggers that buy there.
Yeah,
and that's their slice of Australian dream. They won't hear a bad word about it. They're obviously living an uncomfortable life. It's fucking hot. It's fucking hot, cold. They can fit a car in the driveway. Maybe there's no foliage. There's no fucking nature strip. It's just homeworld, right?
Yeah.
How are these things getting built? Everyone who drives past thinks those poor buggers. What's going on? That doesn't look sustainable.
Yeah.
Unions.
What?
The unions down there, they can just build what they want.
Yeah, no, well, the unions obviously
Sorry,
in
Josh,
Melbourne.
I'm
We'll do another podcast
Yeah.
on the unions in Melbourne.
Yeah. Thanks,
but
I appreciate it.
How is this getting built? How is that all
Like,
happening?
I think you actually need to train people. I mean, the free TAFE stuff has been pretty good. I think where people, if they want to have a career in it, like, but also the work and the total volume of work has to increase, and we need to make it easier for people to buy and to build. And at the moment, it's pretty expensive. So
because these developers are doing it, like these home worlds are doing it. So families get their block of land with a house on it, a new house.
Yeah,
People don't build their own house anymore. As you're saying, it's too expensive to do that anyway.
It is expensive, but it's also like where, the question is where, and then what community infrastructure is also there at the same time, right? And like Melbourne's had areas of growth, especially in the west, where like it's like there's a bit more land, there's a bit more space, but we also need to make sure that there's schools. There's a lot of work now. We've got to, like, I know that people really focus on it. Sam Ray, who's the member for Hawke, he's done amazing work in actually getting funding to fix some of the roads. People need to be able to drive to work. So it's housing, and then it's all the infrastructure around it that we need to make sure we're doing. And as Melbourne gets bigger, we do need people to be able to move around the city, get public transport, and also have flexible working arrangement. Like if there's this whole mentality, like you've got to go an hour and a half into Melbourne every day, that's 3 hours of your day that you're going to spend in a car or on the train. Like, do you really need to? Some jobs you do, some jobs you don't, and you got to work it out. But I think having that flexibility, that productivity, if you've got kids, do you really want to spend 3 hours in the car every day? Like, so I think, which is Peter Dutton's policy at the moment, right? So I think there's a lot in this where, like, I wish I was Lord for the day, and I wish I could say house there, house there, house there, but it's not like that. If this thing's complicated, we need to plan our cities, we need to work with state governments, speed up planning approvals. If it doesn't meet the standards, it doesn't go through. If it does, it gets through and we build it because it costs money to delay that. Get rid of some red tape, have some clear guidelines of where you want to build, and also do everything you can to get more supply chains into Australia so that the actual cost of building goes down. Train as many people who want to work in the industry as possible and get building.
Okay.
That's what I'd do.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
Also, make it so you can use your MasterCard instead of a bloody MyKey, which you've got to put $10 on just to get one.
I'll send an email to the Victorian government about that.
They're phasing that out anyway.
In the arse it was.
What do you want to say to the people of McNamara? We have a lot of followers on our bustling inland newspaper. McNamara,
I mean, I feel really privileged to be the member for McNamara, and I feel really grateful that for 2 elections, people have put trust in me, and I've tried to work extremely hard to be a strong voice, and whether it's issues that affect one community and may not affect another, I've tried to make sure that whatever the issue is that's in front of me, the people know I'll stand up for them, and people know I'll stand up for different parts of our community when I need to. And whether it's climate, the LGBTIQ community, the Jewish community, cost of living relief, more funding for housing, like these have been things I've worked really hard on. And, I feel like we have unfinished business in government. I feel like it's really important that if we are in government, the community has a strong voice inside it. And if I do get the privilege of being the member for McNamara again, I'll do absolutely everything I can for the amazing people that I'm privileged to represent.
There he is. Josh Burns, thank you for talking to us on Betoota Talks, and good luck in the election.
Thanks, boys.
We'll be watching, mate.
Appreciate it.